Welcome to MSG Presents. I'm your host with the most, the man with the plan, the Scottie Pippen of podcast pimping.
Hey everybody, how you doing? Come on in. I hope everybody's having a good day. Welcome. It's so good to see you. Tonight we are meeting with our estate planning club, and this is your chance to build legacy, prepare for the next generation. This is what we're all doing. We are all warriors for generational wealth. That's pretty good. I think that's a good term. Generational wealth warriors. We are going to fight to not just protect the ball, but we're going to pass the ball. We're going to pass it to the kids, pass it to the grandkids, pass it to all the people that matter to us. And so anyway, as you all know, the other day, a lot of you got a chance to meet Mr. Eric McLeod. Eric is a smart brother. He's been in the wealth management space for a while. He's a Northwestern graduate. And in fact, I can say I applied for Northwestern for my doctorate. I did not get in. Still mad about it. Still mad. And so anyway, how you doing today, brother?
I'm doing well, and I am really pleased to be back. We had a great conversation yesterday, which my network loved. So it's really good to be back.
The excellent filmmaker, I think Mark Harris. Are you familiar with Mark by chance?
I am. Yes.
Yeah. Mark, and I know he reps Englewood quite a lot. So it seems like you're connected to this space. Is there a personal connection there in terms of being born and raised there or something like that?
No. So what would happen, Dr. Boyce, I was actually working in law firms when I was younger as a paralegal, real estate paralegal. And one of my coworkers came up to me one day and was like, "Hey, I know you're pro-Black and you like to do things in the community. We got some stuff happening out in Greater Englewood that I think you might be interested in." And it just started from there. We had a group of people that wanted to create another community development corporation because they'd had one years ago and it just kind of phased out. And so we formed this collective and relaunched and rebuilt the Greater Englewood CDC. We went through the whole business planning process, bringing stakeholders to the table. And so I was the first executive director and the first board president. And after that, I just continued to do work in the Greater Englewood community.
Wow, I love that. Now, how many years have you been sort of doing this kind of thing?
Over a decade. It's been over a decade at this point. Something I truly enjoy. Once I got knowledge of self as far as who I was, I really started to think about, okay, you have this knowledge about who you are, you know what your ancestors have done. What can you do to help try to continue to move us forward and move forward culture? And so I really found over time, Dr. Boyce, that I enjoyed helping to launch and build these social enterprises, especially in spaces like Greater Englewood.
Interesting. Okay, so you mentioned that you are pro-Black, and I know that term pro-Black can mean different things to different people. So what does being pro-Black mean to you?
That's a great question. We actually did a podcast episode about that. What does it mean to be pro-Black? So I love that question. So for me, it is having this Black first mentality. So, and what I mean by that is, so whatever resources and skills that I have to bring to the table. So we talked about going to business school and all this other stuff. My thought process is, if you have those experiences, what can you do to bring it back to other Black people? Even as a financial advisor, my definition of being pro-Black is I decided to focus on Black people primarily in my practice and even with building businesses, because again, it's about my resources and how I can help move forward culture. And it's definitely not just walking around with a sweatshirt on or some hat. Like it's based on action and what you can do to move things forward on a daily basis.
Yeah, well, and I think that's a really important point you're making there, because I think all of us should spend time really thinking about like what does being pro-Black mean to you? Because, sometimes I can get confused. I remember one time, brother, I remember seeing Diddy showed a picture of Cardi B and her husband Offset, and they were standing next to a Lamborghini, and he used the hashtag Black Excellence. And I remember thinking, I kind of disagree. I don't know if you're excellent just because you have a nice car or white people put you on TV. Not to say that they can't be excellent people in their own right. I'm not saying that, but I think sometimes it's almost as if there's a conflict between those of us that kind of want to raise the bar and say, that my version of pro-blackness means I want to improve the community, even if it means a little tough love, pointing out some issues, talking about how we can get better, versus others who might say, no, pro-black just means that anything that's black, you love it. And I that part I can't identify with as much, because it's almost like, someone saying that you love your child if you give your child whatever they want, whenever they want. To me, loving a child means training the child to be a healthy, happy, secure, confident, capable adult, rather than just saying, well, okay, I love my baby, so I'm gonna get my baby anything they want. Your baby's obese and acting a fool and all these other things. Anyway, so I didn't even ask that as a question. I just talked too long right there. Did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Well, I think, it's a great thing to talk about. I mean, I've actually been accused by family members of not being pro-black because I went to Northwestern, right? It was kind of in a jokey, hee, ha, ha type of thing. But I remember, I think it was last year, they played Howard. So Northwestern played Howard in football. We went to the game, and I had a little Kellogg hat on. I wasn't, now everybody who knows me knows I love HBCUs, even though I didn't attend one. But, I'm representing. So we go up in there, and one of my family members was like, you up in here with that Northwestern hat on. How could you do that? You always talking about you pro-black. You ain't pro-black. And I'm like, I'm not pro-black because I went to Kellogg and I got a Kellogg hat. Okay. So, but that helped me to understand. It's like, again, I like what you said. Like, we have I think we need to get a more standardized definition maybe of what pro-black is, because we got so many different people with their thoughts on what it is. And I think we always try to find ways to exclude other people from being pro-black, right? You did this, so you're not pro-black. I think we have to work past that.
Yeah, well, it's interesting, and and we're gonna get to the financial stuff, because I think that when you talk about pro-blackness, you have to talk about black economics, right? Because I personally believe that our economic situation is a big chunk of what leads us to our oppression. I mean, your day starts off with you reporting to a white man for work every day. So that right there, is massive for a lot of people. But, I agree with you in terms of us working toward a standardized definition, because it seems like it reminds me of like how Democrats and Republicans will both call themselves patriots, but have very different views on what it means to be pro-America, right?
Absolutely.
Some people may think that supporting America means being protectionist economically. Some people think that it means fighting the power and dismantling certain systems. Some people may say it means preserving certain systems, right?
That's
right. And so really it is kind of difficult, right? And even with myself, I even am criticizing myself, because I've been critical of people, and I kind of sometimes I double back and say, okay, Boyce, like, let's chill out. Let's figure out a way to be who you are without necessarily discrediting somebody else's version of what it means to be pro-black, right? Yeah. And so actually, I'm going to ask you a question, and I'd love for you to respond, and I'm going to do something real awkward, because I'm going to step over here for a minute, because I just realized I got something going on with my family. I got to handle this, so I'm going to literally hand you the stage for a minute, because I'm going to disappear off camera. So, but I want to ask you this question. So, in terms of pro-blackness, first thing I'm going to say, I define you as pro-black not because of where you went to school and your amazing credentials. I see you as pro-black for two key reasons when I read your bio. One was you're a husband, and you said a father of 3 children. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Right.
Yep.
That's now let me ask you: is your wife black?
1,000%.
Okay.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because that's where I start to get judgmental on people when they talk about they're pro-black, and okay, so yeah.
Okay, man, and that's funny, y'all. The question was coming out of my mouth, and I said, "Oh shoot, boy, she should have probably found out," but because this is gonna be awkward if it. Yeah, okay, and again, it doesn't disqualify. It just would have been I would have just had to shift in the seat a little bit and figure it out. But okay, so you got a black wife, 3 black children. That right there, to me, is one definition of pro-blackness, because you made this substantial investment in a black family. We know as a
True.
community, we don't have, well, that our family structure has been destabilized deliberately. And so the fact that you're contributing to that in the best way that you can is to me pro-Black. Secondly, you mentioned the work you're doing in Englewood. We know Englewood is a community that's diverse, right? It has some good and
Yeah.
bad, right? And but there's so much potential, so much power there. Like guys like yourself and Mark Harris, who I admire you immensely, because you're making that direct contribution. Can you speak a little bit more in depth in terms of like when you're with your thought process on your definition of pro-Blackness and how you execute that in your life? Because I want to hear that because I'm gonna step away, but I'll still be able to hear you when you answer. I want to hear that because I really think as a community, like you said, we have to standardize that and kind of figure out, okay, like what's your contribution going to be? Like we ain't going to sit here.
Right.
We got work to do. So go ahead, brother. You answer that question. I'm going to step away for 1 second, please.
Quick pause. If you are enjoying MSG Presents, make sure to subscribe and share. Now back to the episode.
Okay, sounds good. So yeah, I think so. Good morning, B1 family. I think some of you came in a little bit later, but yeah, let's have this conversation about pro-Blackness. So for me, it's really about thinking about myself, not just individually, but thinking about Blackness as a collective. So for me, being pro-Black, it's me thinking about how can I push forward the collective. And so it's definitely this mindset of not just looking at individual contributions. Whatever my contributions are, I'm always thinking about, how can I bring this back and make the culture, I don't even like saying better, but just how can I come back and contribute? Because people have poured into and contributed to me. Sometimes I think we forget that we've been poured into and people have sacrificed and made different efforts for us to move forward. And so, I want to continue to think about, how can I come back and contribute? And that's really a key part of pro-Blackness to me, for sure.
All right. Well, I love that. And I tell you, it's an uphill battle sometimes, but I think that also in the midst of an uphill battle, and we can shift this to investing and things like that. In the midst of an uphill battle, what people should understand, economically anyway, for sure, and otherwise, is that it's in the uphill battle where you find the greatest opportunities. If you're an investor, people don't make the investments that make them rich. They don't tend to make those when times are extraordinarily good. They make those investments when times are bad. They buy the distressed asset that then they pour work into, love into, and it becomes the celebrated asset. It becomes the valuable asset, right? You add value, right? Just like house flipping, right? If you flip in a mansion where everything's already perfect, that's a harder business deal than flipping a house that's dilapidated, maybe in disrepair, needs some work, right? And so when you think about that analogy, it not only requires you to be able to see the potential of things, but it also requires you to have a commitment in terms of putting in the time and energy to flip that house, and also skill set. The more skill you have in house flipping, the better off you're going to be at the end, right? So the Black community, I think everybody should think of this, and I'd like to get your thoughts on this, brother, is I think I look at the Black community like a house that, needs to be flipped a little bit. Right. And it's a little bit torn down, in disrepair. Maybe it's been neglected because the people that could have fixed the house didn't want to. Maybe the people that want to see the house fixed don't have all the skill sets necessary to fix it. Or maybe we don't even have the time or even the psychological commitment to fixing it. Right. Things that are not invested in don't tend to grow. Right. And our community, I think about, extraordinary communities around the country, like Englewood, for example, where maybe the community doesn't get everything it needs because the resources are not allocated toward that. And I'm not just talking about resources from the city. We know what they're going to do, but what about us, right? If I'm getting up every day and leaving my neighborhood to go work across town, then the area across town is going to benefit. Right. The businesses over there are going to grow because I'm pouring my time and energy and my skill set into that. I've been trained specifically to build their businesses. Right. And so I think that this really speaks to a need for a re-education for all Black people, right? I think education should center around what does it take to build a community? What does the community need? Well, I think the community needs families. Why not have training on how to be an adequate husband and father? How about training on how to be a great mother? How to raise your kids, in an appropriate way? I know we need businesses. How about training on how to start businesses and how to maintain those businesses and grow them into spaces that can employ other people, right? We need institutions, period. And I say all this because I know that there's been a lot of conversation this weekend about, and I'd love to get your thoughts on any of that, plus this other topic. I'm going to shut up in a minute because I want you to talk. I was trying to explain to a lot of folks this weekend when they were talking about Coach Prime and his son Shador, his trouble he had getting drafted and stuff like that, which I thought was just unfair because I think he's much better than what they gave him credit for. But I told people, I said, well, the reality is that, I heard people say, well, they can't stand a confident Black man. They don't like a confident Black man. And I say, yeah, they really don't. But unfortunately, Deion Sanders was never an owner of anything in the NFL. He was an employee. And you can pass real estate and assets to your children, but you cannot pass them a job. And so what might be the challenge, the reason maybe the employer has trouble dealing with an overconfident person is because you can't really be an employee and act like you're the boss. Right. Not most of the time. Right. Like in my father's house, I got to the point where I was a man and I started acting like a man. And that became a conflict because my father's like, no, I'm the man of this house. You're not the man. Absolutely. So in order for you to be the man, you got to get out of here and go find your own place. Then you can be the man in your house. You can't be the man in my house. Do you see what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
And so my thought is when we're up here talking about what I'm proud, I'm confident, I do what I want. But sir, I need you to give me a job because I didn't put in the time and energy to work with other people in my community to create our own league. We had the Negro Leagues, we threw that away so Jackie Robinson could get a job, right? So because we have not had an interest in doing the work to establish a space where we are truly respected and all these other things we want, that's a consequence, I think, of not having the commitment to institutional development in the Black community. What say you?
I couldn't agree more. And I think it goes back to, also when we talk about being pro-Black, and I said this to you off camera, I'll say it again to the community. But like you, for example, when I first started trying to get myself together financially, you emerged as someone that I could learn from and be an inspiration, right? But I could have made the choice that, oh, this is another Black man. I can't learn from him. I can't be inspired from him, right? And so I bring that up to say, I think part of this pro-Blackness and part of this institutional issue that we have is partly how we view one another. Can I look at you? So like, say you hit me up and like, hey, Eric, I want you to come work in the Black Business School and be an instructor. Maybe I have an offer from another organization, right? It's like, would I view that in the same light as I would this offer from these other people? And so like, even with myself, I try to always make sure I'm continuing to value other people who look like me so that we can build these institutions and stop depending on these other people for jobs and opportunities. But if I don't value Dr. Boyce properly or other people who look like me, there's no way in the world I'm going to use them as a contractor to build this house that we're talking about.
That's real. That's a real assessment. It's you and I have both dealt with that, I'm sure, where you go into spaces and because you're Black and you do what you do, it's not seen in the same light that it would be if you were white. Right. And, and then what kind of helps are these, what gives people trust, because you have to trust institutions for them to work, really. So what happens in terms of trust and validation is you say, yeah, but I went to Northwestern. And they're like, oh, okay. So white folks said you were good. Okay. So I trust you now. Right. Or me, I'm like, well, yeah, no, I taught at Syracuse University, Syracuse, right? Yeah, and it is challenging. It's very frustrating, right? Because you're right. Yeah. It's like, it's almost like even like just corporate brands, the way you build brands with certain perceptions people have of that brand. Like if I say Coca-Cola, people know what they have an expectation, McDonald's or whatever, or Nike or Google. And for Black people, we don't necessarily have that same branding. If anything, the brand of the Black man is being diminished and destroyed by people that have deliberately worked to destroy the brand of the black man. Right around the world,
Absolutely.
you look at the way hip hop portrays black males. I mean, it's not all of it, not all hip hop, but you know what I'm talking about. That stuff where
Yeah,
they
some
act
of
like
it.
we don't want to love our kids. We want to just sleep with anything that moves. We want to kill each other and go to prison for 100 years. We want to get high on drugs and all this other stuff. And that makes it difficult when you have a counter narrative.
Right.
So let's dive deeper into legacy then. So you and I both as black men, we both had an interest in what happened this weekend with Coach Prime and Shador, and then also the stuff with Shannon Sharpe and everything else. And I mentioned this to everyone the other day, but we can mention again because I'd like to get your thoughts on it as a person who understands legacy, estate planning, stuff like that. I saw, in the case everybody doesn't know, I assume you don't live under a rock, but Shannon Sharpe, the Club Shay Shay host, who's also on ESPN, was hit with this $50 million lawsuit from this young lady who he was engaged with, or not engaged, but he had an entanglement with, from OnlyFans. And she's not black, she's melanin deficient. And basically he offered her $10 million, and she said no. She filed a lawsuit instead. And so here's what happened. So as I've been thinking about this, it made me furious when I saw it. And I had my anger, but I had to process, like, why am I so upset? Well, because I know that the word poor, and everybody in here knows the word poor stands for passing over opportunities repeatedly. So my belief, Eric, is that in many cases, generational wealth doesn't exist because when there's an opportunity to have some generational wealth, something silly ends up costing us the whole bag. And so here's what I did. I looked up the endowments of some of the HBCUs in this country that are struggling. I looked up the endowment specifically of Savannah State University, where Shannon Sharpe went to college. And I said, ain't this a bitch? Excuse my French. I said, the endowment of that school is $12 million. This lady is going to receive more money from Shannon Sharpe than the amount if he had spent that money on that school instead of on this girl. This would have literally funded that institution for the next 100 years. Like, literally, I mean, they're living off of a $12 million endowment. He could have instantaneously doubled their endowment, but instead, this money is going to go to a 21-year-old who, who's doing OnlyFans, who cares nothing about the black community. I'm furious about that. Can you give some thoughts on anything that I just said?
Absolutely. And I have to say this, one of the people that I formed, so the Greater Englewood Chamber of Commerce, one of the other co-founder, her name is Felicia Slayton Young. She's an alum of Savannah State.
Oh,
So
wow.
so it kind of connected in my mind as you were saying that.
Oof.
But yeah, I mean, so that made me upset too, Dr. Boyce, when I saw that. And my thing about that was, it's just like, why? So I felt like Shannon was somebody that was reasonably intelligent, I thought, and I'm not judging him, but it's like we've seen this play out so many different times, and he's not new to being in the media. So I just didn't understand the thought. Like, this is what I said to my son about this. My son is 17. I said, we have to think about situations in terms of how are they going to play out. So you're a black, successful, multimillionaire man, and you're dating a 19-year-old from another culture. What is the probability, right? Thinking about risk and probability, what's the probability that this is going to go in your favor? Very low.
Wow.
I mean, it would have to be perfect for nothing to happen, for you not to get sued, for your money not to get compromised. And so, yeah, it's just, I don't think Shannon is somebody that considers himself pro-black. And maybe that's part of the issue. But, that definitely was just a high risk move, and it went against him.
You know what's so crazy? What's interesting about that last piece that you mentioned? First off, I love the fact that you're talking to your son about this. I think everybody that has a son needs to, like, this is a case study. This is a master class. It's happening right before. It's God's master class. God's like, here's what happens if you keep on doing this stuff.
That's right.
But then the other thing too is you mentioned that thing about Shannon, whether he's pro-black or not. And I think that goes back to what we were talking about earlier. It's interesting because I bet you that if you were to ask Shannon, do you consider yourself pro-black? I bet he might make an argument to say, yes, I am. And let me tell you why.
Yeah.
He went to an HBCU. He played a sport that's black dominated. He has a black family. His brother Sterling played in the NFL and all that, and he's from the South. He's very familiar with black culture. He's friends with a lot of black athletes, he and Coach Prime and others. And it's kind of interesting to try to But here's the point though. The thing that throws me off a little bit is, so you're pro-black in all these other ways, the dance moves, maybe you know what grandma's fried chicken tastes like, and all these things that are identified as black culture. But then when it comes time for you to invest, like really like invest your life, your time, your energy, when you could choose to invest in a black woman, a black family,
Yeah.
that's not of interest, right? It's like, no, I'm going to invest in a little German OnlyFans model or whatever she is. And you see that happen a lot, right?
Yeah.
And this circles back to what it means to be pro-black. I say, Eric, that I'm wondering, like, if it's a matter of saying, like, what are you investing in? Like, what do you value? What do you have that's valuable for you? And where are you investing the bulk of it? And let me explain like this, right? If my money matters to me, then you would say, well, where are you investing your money? Like you look at, I remember seeing some of the rappers. I think it might have been Jay-Z, but not being hard on him. But I remember seeing where he would make donations. Like they would make, he and Beyonce would make these donations to like HBCUs and stuff like that, which is great. But it would be like 100,000, 50,000, 200,000, something like that. But then when it came down to him investing millions, it would be with some white boys in Silicon Valley. Right. And you know what that reminded me of? They reminded me of, when you're black and you're pro-black, but when you talk about your time, like we value our time, right? So I might say, well, I'm pro-black because I go down to the boys club every Saturday and I donate time. That's great. But then I would say, but what do you do with the other 167 hours a week of your life? Oh, well, I give the bulk of my time to Massa because he need me to come to the job. Do you see what I mean? Do you see what I mean, right? Like, and the same thing happened in slavery. Dr. Claude Anderson talks about it. He said that slave children were neglected because the slaves had to get up in the morning and get up before Massa's kids and make sure that the breakfast was cooked and the fire was started and all that. And then they would come home at night. And nobody ever asked, well, what's happening to your kids while you're off giving the bulk of your time to someone else? So I would say this with the Shannon thing. It's like, okay, so when it came time to invest in a woman, you didn't invest in a black woman, you invested in this lady. When it comes to the bulk of your money, she's going to get more money from you than that. She's going to be wealthier than 99.9% of all black people. Same thing with Bill Cosby. Bill Cosby, I would say that women that don't even care anything about the black community have probably got at least 250 million, maybe $250 million out of him. And that money, and you think about what that money could have done. You think about what the work you're doing in Englewood. Imagine if Shannon walked up and said, I'm done with the OnlyFans models. I'm gonna take that 15, 20 million, and instead of paying her, I'm gonna give it to your organization. What could your organization do in terms of changing lives with that kind of money?
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And I wish they would, because we're actually doing a real estate development with the Greater Englewood Chamber. $10 million would come in handy. But here's the thing, and I want to ask you this, brother, since we're talking about this, and I was talking to my mom about this. So I'm one of these people, I love Black women, and it's just something that's been wired in me some kind of way. I don't, like, if I'm out in society, that's just what I love. But what if you were a person like Shannon or some of these other people, and you really just like white women? You know what I'm saying? And I'm saying, I don't even know if I got a question or a comment or what I'm looking for, but it's like, I don't have to fight the urge. There's no urge there for that. And so are you able to be pro-Black if you've got this inclination? You just love white women. He can pretend for us, but some of these people, that's what they really want. And so what do you do in that situation now? And I'm saying, like, for me and you seem like you're like me, we just love Black women. So it's not an issue. But what if you woke up and you love other cultures more?
How
would you then be pro-Black? Like, how does that work? How could that work?
Interesting. Well, let's say this. I think that you could theoretically marry a woman that wasn't Black and still be pro-Black. If you put that effort into overcompensating, like you say, gosh, I had this guilt of not investing in a Black woman, so I'm gonna give the bulk of my time and my money to Black causes. I can forgive you for that. I think it's a matter of substance over flash. If your connection to Blackness is silly stuff like I know how to dress a certain way, or I hang out with rappers, or I know what soul food tastes like. I don't care about that stuff. Or I listen to Black music, right? Those are silly things. But I think overall, going back to your question about, like, okay, what if I just really like white women. First off, I'd say that's a preference. That's a personal preference. You have a right to have that. Second of all, I would even wonder, though, if that was a little bit of a white supremacy mental illness that was injected in you. Because when I just really say I prefer white women and black women are automatically subordinated beneath that without exception, I think that's kind of an issue, right? I think it's one thing to say, hey, I like beautiful women of all backgrounds. I do have a little bit of a preference for this kind of woman or whatever, right? But every woman kind of has some sort of a shot, right? If she's the appropriate kind of person for me or whatever. But when you sort of exclude everyone else except Becky across the hall, I kind of think that's a mental health issue, honestly. You know what I mean?
Okay. Yeah, I feel
But
that.
yeah. And then even then though, here's another interesting point, man. I'd love to get your thoughts on this. I think that as a matter of community maturity amongst black men, I think that there have to be conversations about the fact that who you choose to marry can't just come down to the sex and in this or just the physical attractiveness.
Mhm.
Because I think this is part of the reason why so many marriages don't last. Because people are into the aesthetics of it all. They're thinking about the moment, like we look good right now. We're fly right now. We're gonna have this big wedding right now. And they're not even processing the next 50 years. I've seen what a 50-year marriage looks like, and the way my parents look physically 50 years in ain't what they look like when they were cute and young and 20 years old,
Right.
right? And so just that idea of understanding what legacy building really looks like just knowing like, okay, there's got to be a bunch of variables to factor in other than just the sex and the looks. That I think that's a conversation about maturity that has to be had as well. Like so what that
Yeah.
might mean is, like, I've heard people even say in a very malicious way, in a way that I don't agree with, where they'll say something like, well, women don't matter. They don't marry the man that they're most attracted to. They marry the man that's willing to, that's willing to be a husband. And I'm like, yeah, well, why would you want to try to marry the man that you're most attracted to? Because that's just
No
attraction.
doubt.
You want to marry
Yeah.
the man that's the best for you in your life. You want to marry the man that's going to be solid for you. Because there's a lot, you and I know this, there's a lot of good looking men who ain't going to show up for you. They will not go with
Yeah.
you to the doctor's appointments when you get diagnosed with cancer. They're not going to be
Right.
there for you and your kid. So why in the hell would anybody think it's logical to marry somebody just because they look the best? like,
That's
no,
a good
I
point.
want the person, like, you can get a little bit of both. Like, okay, you look good,
Yeah.
but you are good, right? You're
Right.
solid. So what do you think about that? I mean, I almost think that we need some sort of more conversations like that. Give me your thoughts on that.
I love what you just said. And so the word that I kept thinking about as you were saying that is sacrifice. So
Mm,
say you are one of these brothers and you really do like white women or women from other cultures, but like you were saying, who will you marry though? Because when we think about some of these other cultures, they're married to someone that's in their culture, but they might do other things on the side. But they're trying to keep the wealth and the structure in their culture. So as we were trying to define like this standardized definition of
mm,
pro-Black, the word sacrifice might have to be in there.
mm,
What are you
mm.
willing to sacrifice? And like you said, and we were talking about, it might be your time, it might be your expertise, it might be who you choose to be in a relationship with. Are you willing to make that sacrifice? Yes or no?
Man, that's heavy. When you say the word sacrifice, I'm also hearing the word investment. That's what investment
Absolutely.
is. Is sacrificing something now so you can have more later. And the reason that I want everyone to stop and meditate on that is because part of the reason your community doesn't have any wealth is because because we don't understand sacrifice
Yeah.
collectively. Some of us
Right.
do, a lot of us do. There's a lot of folks in here that have done well, saved and invested their whole life and built amazing things, have great health, great relationships, everything else. But a lot of us don't have everything that we'd like to have because, number one, we didn't want to make the sacrifice maybe when we were
That's right.
younger. Like, okay, I want to go
Yeah.
chase some booty as opposed to pick a good woman or something like that. Or two, someone else was not willing to make the sacrifice on our behalf,
Right.
meaning like our
Yeah,
parents. I
for sure.
I yeah, I mean, I probably, who knows what I missed out on in terms of an inheritance because my father chose heroin instead of being a father, right?
No doubt.
So it's
Yeah.
kind of one of these things where you go to that word sacrifice you used, And I really think everyone could meditate on this, ask themselves that question. Where are you making your sacrifice? Right? Where are you? It could be with money. Like, where are you sacrificing some money so you can have more money later? Your time, where are you sacrificing time so that you can have something more later? It could be health. Where are you sacrificing? Like, I have to sacrifice salty, fatty, sugary food in order to have better health later on. I got to sacrifice time in the gym, right? Sacrifice is hard because it links to delayed gratification, and delayed gratification, you and I both know that's the key to success. That's the key to wealth. That's the key to having anything you want. If you can sacrifice and have delayed gratification, you will win. And in fact, right now, even with the tariff battle with China, I feel like the U.S. is going to lose that battle because the Chinese understand sacrifice and delayed gratification.
Absolutely. No question about it. Yeah. They made that.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I get a question.
Yeah.
Brother. What's that painting behind you? That's a really awesome painting. Is that yours?
Brother, this is a Basquiat knockoff.
Huh.
So I bought this in Milwaukee. So I met a brother in Milwaukee that had an art shop, and he was selling replicas. And so this is the same painting that Jay-Z bought for, I think, $100 million, but it always resonated with me. If you look at the picture in the face, it just kind of tells me to always, no matter how much you get into corporate and different things that you're involved in, don't lose your edge. And that's just a daily reminder to me. Don't lose my mental edge or whatever edge that I use to get to wherever I'm at. This reminds me of it on a daily basis. So that's a Basquiat.
Wow, that's a beautiful painting. That's very cool.
Thank you, brother. Thank you.
Yeah. So, by the way, everybody, I'm speaking to Mr. Eric McLeod, and Eric is a financial expert, Northwestern graduate. He's deeply involved in extraordinary work in the Englewood area in Chicago. And so, by the way, everybody, I want you to also know that Eric is going to do a presentation tomorrow night in our Legacy Investment Club, which is drboycelift.com. Lift stands for Legacy Investors for Tomorrow. So if you have an interest in estate planning, legacy building, things like that, we got you in the Black Business School. Feel free to go to drboycelift.com, and you can get a chance to speak to Mr. McLeod about anything you have, any questions you have in terms of estate planning. You know what, Mr. McLeod, I just did, or Eric, is it okay if I call you Eric?
Please, brother.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. So Eric, I actually recently just re-signed my trust documents the other day because I've really, and even for myself, like I don't want anybody to ever think that I got it all together, because I don't think, I know I don't. Maybe other people do, but I don't have it all together. I'm trying, right? That's what the best thing I can say is I do try extremely hard. I'm very good at trying regularly to get better, and I hope that has helped to make me better in certain ways. But it's always difficult to forget about the moment and think about the future, right? Disconnect from what's happening right now and understand that this too shall pass. So one of the things that I did to challenge myself was I went ahead and I sat down and I really just imagined that I wasn't here. I just said, okay, let's try to live forever. We have to secure things right now instead of putting it off till tomorrow, so that if I'm not here, all this work is not wasted. Right. So that meant putting together the board for the Black Business School, funding the board, funding whatever they were doing, just saying, okay, well, what if Boyce isn't here? Like, how does that work? What does that look like? And because you get one chance to leave those instructions. Once you're gone, it's over. And I'd like to get your thoughts on that in terms of just how important that is, and maybe why some of us don't think about these things until really sometimes we die without thinking about them, and then others have to figure it all out. What's your experience in that space, and what are your thoughts?
Well, first, brother, I have to acknowledge all the beautiful people in the chat. We got a lot of great comments coming through. It's really good to be talking to you all. But yeah, I love the fact that you thought about that for yourself again. I think it goes back to this concept that we've been talking about of, like, what does it really mean to be pro-Black? And so as a financial professional, you've seen this too. We've had so many people that have built all this wealth, including their businesses, and then they pass away and everything just disappears. And so for me, I always talk to my clients about, like, if you are, and many of them say they're pro-Black, which is fine. I'm like, if you're really pro-Black, have we done everything we can do to make sure this wealth transfers over to the next generation? I know you did the paperwork, right? But have things changed? Do your children know what their roles are going to be? This is something that I have to continue to work on with my children. But it's like, my daughter, what's her role going to be? What is my 17-year-old's role going to be in the process? And have they been educated properly to assume those roles? So, you know what I mean? Because a lot of people we talk to, brother, they got the paperwork. The paperwork is done. But it's these other pieces that I feel like, because the main thing when I was selling life insurance years ago, Dr. Boyce, that people would say to me is, I don't want to get $1 million life insurance policy because I don't want to give my kids that much money. I heard that over and over and over and over again. And none of them really, and I wasn't seasoned enough at the time to have this conversation, but if I was to talk to those people now, I would say, I understand that, but maybe there's things we can do to prepare them to receive that money. Or you get $1 million insurance policy, you don't have to give it all to them at one time. You might give them $25,000 a year for 40, 50 years. You might take the rest and donate it to your favorite charity. There's just a lot of things that you can do, but we don't want to miss that opportunity to generate that generational wealth.
Wow. That's really interesting. I wonder why. I think taking the inventory on like why we don't want our kids to have any money, or why we feel like, oh, that's too much. You should. It's really interesting. It's almost like a self-esteem thing in terms of us really thinking about like, what do we really feel like we deserve? Like, do you not want your child to have $1 million because you just, I don't know. I'm gonna tell you what my reservation would be is I gained so much in terms of character from the hustle, the struggle. Like, the struggle, when it got too bad, it was really bad. But generally having something to work toward really drove me for many years. And I think that it took me time to figure out like, okay, if you're 25 and you're set for life, what is it to do? And then you see about kids sitting around getting high all day and doing nothing, right? So that would be I think my biggest concern. But I think to your point, though, it seems that it's almost like the problem with that type of logic, though, is that I think so many of us grew up just straight working class. And there are certain assumptions we make about what it means to go into this economy. Okay, you're going to work for a white man. You're going to struggle. You're going to deal with racism on the job. You're going to be stressed out. You're going to live paycheck to paycheck. And it's almost like that's a tier that we kind of expect ourselves to be on because that's just who we are. But then there's another tier, right? Like, for example, Donald Trump's children are maybe on that tier or even higher, where it says, no, you're still going to work hard, but you're going to be running businesses. You're going to be managing your portfolio. Right. You're going to spend the whole day going around looking at properties for real estate acquisitions. And it's interesting because it's almost like we have to be trained to think that way and trained to believe that we deserve that. And then I think it becomes easier to say, oh, not only can I leave you $1 million, but I should leave you $1 million. I have to leave you $1 million in order for you to maintain, that level of autonomy that allows you to truly explore what you can truly become when you're not constrained by having to go work for massive 40 hours a week. Did I say that right? What do you think?
1,000%. And so here's what I had to do. And like we said, it's a work in progress for all of us. It's things that I'm still working on. But what helped me is thinking about my family as a business. And so once I started to view it that way, it's more about me, because I wouldn't want my children to have $1 million right now either, right? I'll just be clear about that. They're not ready for it. But if I'm thinking about myself as a CEO, then I'm thinking, okay, why isn't little Eric ready to get this $1 million? What do we need to do? Or why isn't my daughter Asia ready to, and so making sure, so even in corporate, they have professional development. We can professionally develop our children to receive our estate. It might be different for each child, but we can do that. We can have professional development for our children.
Wow. I want to put that on a shirt. My family is a business. I think that should be. I mean, everybody type that in the chat. Let's build on that. Everybody type in the chat. My family is a business, or my family is my business. However you want to say it, like, because I really think that's a powerful idea, and what it does is it challenges our preconceived notions of just who we are and how we're supposed to exist in this economy as Black people. we tend to really exist as employees. We don't really see
Yes.
ourselves as people that can really have a say in our own economic destiny, even at the highest levels. Imagine if every single guy in the NFL or the NBA grew up in a family where they see themselves, their families as a business.
Yeah.
We probably would have had our own sports leagues by now, stuff like that, because there wouldn't be sort of like that with the whole Dion thing we were talking about. Like I'm going to get my son a job, that kind of thing. No, I
Yeah.
want I'm going to make my son an owner. Right. And
That's
if we're going to own something that our family's been invested in, right? Because you look at, for example, the Hallis family that owns the Chicago Bears. They're not, when they think about getting their children opportunities, they're not saying like, we're going to make you a Chicago Bear. They'd be like, well, why would you want to do that? You're going to get brain damage, right? It's like, no, we're going to put you in the
Exactly.
owner's box and you're going to
Yeah.
own 10% of the team, just like
That's
your dad
right.
did or whatever, and that kind of thing. So I kind of think that that's important. And what the point I liked, and I want to make sure we don't miss that as well, is you talked about professional development and, as being part of that, right? Not just believing it and saying it, but saying
Right.
like, okay, all that time you're going to spend in school learning all these other things, which we know what school does. School prepares you to work for other people. We're going to take over some of the educational process and give you the real skills that are really going to matter for the mission that we're putting you on.
That's right.
I think I love what you just said there, man. So my family is a business. I love that. And I hope everybody will take something from that. So, brother, I'm gonna let you get the last words. I enjoyed the conversation a lot. That's probably why I did so much talking. I'm almost embarrassed because I
I
talk so
enjoyed it.
much. Please, did you have any final thoughts in terms of what to expect tomorrow and just what we can walk away with?
Yeah, well, again, thank you, brother, for having me on. This has been beautiful. You have a very abundant community here. So I hope to see you all tomorrow. So tomorrow we're going to be really talking about strategy. So my role typically in the estate planning process, you will have an attorney and your accountant and all that, but we're going to get into a little bit of mindset stuff. Getting beyond saying what you need to do and getting really into more the mindset, how to get in a different mindset in terms of how you view what you have. Now, there's probably a couple people out there that are saying, I've been hesitant to really go too deep in my estate planning because I don't really feel like I have enough. I don't have $1 million. What I will say to you all is we're going to talk about getting into this mindset of not thinking about how much you don't have, but how do we make sure that what you do have actually transfers over to that next generation? It doesn't matter if it's $100,000. It could be jewelry. It could be family heirlooms, art, whatever it is. And this whole concept that we're also going to talk about is how do you know your numbers? So we talked about our children, talked about my children. So it's like my daughter, how much should she actually get? Right? My estate might be worth $5 million. Am I going to give her $150,000, $200,000, $2 million? So we're going to talk about some formulas that we can use to determine what's a good amount to provide to your loved ones. So I'm looking forward to that conversation.
Yeah, me too. So it's going to happen tomorrow night at 8 o'clock, everybody. And if you want to join our Legacy Investors for Tomorrow Club, you can go to drboycelift.com. That's drboycelift.com. And tomorrow, Eric is going to be our special guest, and I'm going to do my job, which is to introduce him, and I'm going to shut up, and he's going to take over the class because I know when to talk and when not to talk, and I'll be learning along with you. And so also, I want to mention to everybody that if you are interested in stock options, you can get free access to our mini class on stock options. You can go to drboycecoin.com so you can get the stock options mini class and a wealth elevation session. So feel free to go to drboycecoin.com, and I'll hit you guys up a little bit later. I'll also send a direct link via text. If you want to get on the text list for this class, we meet every morning, 7 days a week, 10 a.m. Eastern. Text the word morning, MORNING, to the phone number 87948. Text morning to 87948, and it's drboycelift.com. So if somebody could type that in the chat. And brother, where can people find you?
The easiest way to find me is on LinkedIn. So Eric McLeod, EricMcLoyd. And then I also have a podcast called Money, Sex, Gen X. So you can find it on all the major streaming platforms. And we actually have an episode, Dr. Boyce, called How to Run Your Family Like $1 Million Business. So you all please check that out. I think you'll like it.
Nice.
Yeah.
Money, Sex, and Gen X.
Yeah.
Is that the title?
Yes, it is. Money, Sex, Gen X. Yeah, we talk about relationships and sex. And my co-host is also a Black Gen X brother. And we just give our perspective on life, in those episodes.
All right, well, I'm gonna look it up. I'm gonna follow you. I'm gonna follow you right now. So are you on Spotify?
Yes, definitely on Spotify.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
And I'd love to
I'll
talk to you one day about options too. I'm an options trader too. I do a lot of wheel strategy stuff, but I'm a big options fan for sure.
Okay. Well, that'll be our future conversation then, because options are really. I think there's something great for people. I think we should teach our kids options. I think
really do. Yeah.
Do you agree?
Yeah, I do. So like with me, I learned I don't do like a lot of naked calls and puts, but because I realized I wanted the income. And so I really want us to talk more about, and I know you do this, but like in culture, like the selling covered calls and the cash secured puts to get income. Because I think a lot of people lose a lot of money trying to do naked calls and puts, and then they're out of the game when they could have just been doing like a wheel strategy and get that recurring income. So I'd love to talk more about that.
Oh, I'm the same way. I use the options market for mostly income. I just, I'm not trying to gamble. I want to be the house.
Yeah.
The house
I had
always
my time
wins.
with that. I lost a lot of money messing with that. So I'm like, nah.
Oh, we all did. All of us were crazy 25-year-olds, thinking that we know everything, and then you get older, you're like, nah, I just want some money. I just want some income. You keep all that over there. So we'll bring you back then, and we'll have another conversation about that. And anybody that you all know, we have the Prime program and stuff like that. So feel free to take a look at it. drboyceprime.com. That's that URL. So thank you very much, brother. It was great to see you, man, and it was an honor getting to know you. And I made a friend today. So I look forward to talking again.
Sure. All right. I'm looking forward to it, brother.
Have a good day. See you tomorrow night.
All right. Peace.
Bye, everybody.
Before we close today's episode, a quick heads up. This show isn't just about talk. It's about movement for those building a legacy. It's about helping people heal from the past and level up in life. Real conversations that matter. If you're vibing with the message, make sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with somebody that needs to hear it. Peace.